All right, today we are tackling an absolute giant of history, Rome. Seriously, how does one tiny little settlement on a riverbank grow into an empire that literally defines the Western world? It's a story packed with myth, power, and a legacy that's still with us. So let's just dive right in.
And really, this is the big question, isn't it? How did this one city, built on 7 hills, manage to command such a massive empire? And more than that, how did it leave a legacy so profound that it's baked into our laws, our languages, even the buildings we see today? It's just an incredible, sweeping story of ambition and, eventually, collapse.
So, to really get what made Rome, well, Rome, we've got to start where the Romans themselves started. And that's not with some dry historical fact. Nope, it's with a powerful and pretty violent founding myth.
And this legend, it wasn't just some bedtime story. It was absolutely fundamental to how Romans saw themselves. I mean, the story ends with Romulus killing his own twin brother to become the first king. Just think about that for a second. That is a brutal, brutal beginning. And it set this tone of destiny and, let's be honest, ruthless strengths right from day one.
You know, a lot of people forget this, but before Rome was a famous republic or an empire, it was a kingdom. For about 2.5 centuries, it was ruled by a line of 7 kings, and they were heavily influenced by their neighbors to the north, the Etruscans. This whole era came to a super dramatic end when the people finally got fed up and overthrew the last tyrannical king. And that set the stage for something completely new.
And after kicking out their kings, the Romans launched one of the most famous political experiments in all of history, the Roman Republic. You have to understand, this was a huge deal for its time. I mean, a truly revolutionary idea. They'd gotten rid of kings, and in their place, they built a system where citizens actually elected officials to run things. And at the very heart of it all was the Senate, this powerful assembly of elite families that would basically steer the ship for the next 500 years.
But of course, the Republic wasn't going to be content just being a local player. Oh no. Its ambition was massive, and that led it straight into a century-long, knockdown, drag-out fight with its biggest rival, Carthage. These were the Punic Wars, and they weren't just skirmishes. This was a fight for total survival and supremacy. In the end, it's what gave Rome complete control of the Mediterranean.
But winning, well, it came with a heavy price tag. Trying to manage this huge new territory really started to stretch the Republic's old systems to their breaking point. You had unbelievable wealth flooding into the city, which just made the gap between rich and poor enormous. And politics? It turned into a total battlefield for these super powerful, ambitious generals who had armies that were loyal to them, not to the state. The Republic was literally cracking under the weight of its own success.
And all of this chaos, it leads us right to the doorstep of one of the most famous people in all of history, and to the dramatic, bloody end of the Republic.
This moment right here, this was the absolute point of no return. When Julius Caesar marched his army across that little river, the Rubicon, he wasn't just getting his feet wet, he was shattering Roman law and basically declaring war on the Senate. It was a pure act of rebellion, and it kicked off the final, brutal civil wars that would tear apart the very republic he said he was trying to save.
So, after Caesar is assassinated, his heir, a guy named Octavian, who we'll later know as Augustus, he's the one who comes out on top. He's the one who finally ends 100 years of civil war, and in 27 BC, he becomes the very first Roman emperor. And the change is just night and day. You go from the total chaos of the late Republic to the stability of the early empire, all because power is now in the hands of one man. And what came next was something incredible, the famous Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. For 2 whole centuries, this massive empire experienced a level of stability that was just unheard of. The borders were secure, trade was booming across 3 continents, and it was a golden age for engineering. I mean, this is when they built masterpieces like the Colosseum. It was a good time to be Roman.
But, as we all know, no empire lasts forever. And after centuries of just complete dominance, some very deep, very serious cracks started to show up in Rome's foundations.
So, why? Why did one of the greatest empires in history fall? It's one of those huge questions, and there's no easy answer. It wasn't just one thing. It was more like a perfect storm, a fatal mix of everything going wrong at once. You had political rot from the inside, economic collapse, social chaos, and just constant, immense pressure from invasions all along its massive borders. It's really important to remember that the fall of Rome wasn't like a building collapsing overnight. It was a long, slow, painful decline. The 3rd century was a complete nightmare, a crisis that almost broke the empire completely. Things got so bad that Emperor Diocletian realized it was just too big to be governed by one person, so he made the huge decision to split it in two. And that really set the stage for what we think of as the end, the year 476, when the last emperor in the West was kicked off his throne.
And here's a super important point. When people talk about the fall of Rome, they're almost always talking about the western half. The Eastern Roman Empire, which we now call the Byzantine Empire, didn't just survive, it thrived. It kept going from its capital in Constantinople for another 1,000 years. That's incredible.
Okay, so after all that, the rise, the glory, the fall, what's the big takeaway? Why does Rome still matter so much to us right here, right now? Well, let's take a look at the echoes it left behind, because they are everywhere.
Seriously, Rome's influence is all around us. You know that legal idea, innocent until proven guilty? Yep, that's Roman. Their insane engineering skills. You can still see aqueducts and roads they built that are standing today. The whole concept of a republic with a senate, that's a direct download from Rome. And the language they spoke, Latin, is the mother of languages like French, Spanish, and Italian. It's just wild. When you boil it all down, Rome's story is this timeless, epic lesson. It's a lesson about power, about how incredibly hard it is to govern, about what happens when you expand too far, too fast, but it's also about the amazing ability of ideas to outlive even the most powerful empires. It's a history that really does continue to speak to us today, and it kind of forces you to look around and think about our own civilization story, doesn't it?